part 3 of the top 50 NBA players of all time with rankings 30 through 21 today. I'm Coy Camiscioli here from Philly Sports Talk. Again, part 3 of this 5-part podcast series. And I've really enjoyed it so far. I think it's pretty interesting. Again, a lot of it's opinionated on what people value. And I'll get into that in a few, but it's been fun. If you haven't listened to the previous episodes, I kind of suggest you do that if you're interested in basketball history. But if not, if you just want to hear 30 through 21, then that's fine as well. But yeah, let's get into it. For my criteria, if you haven't listened yet, it's basically based on legacy, impact, and dominance. Those are like the three biggest things, like the kind of legacy that they left behind on the sport. And then also accolades, championships, and more mean a lot as well. But dominance, impact, legacy, pretty much no matter the era. Obviously, if it's close between two guys, I'm going to give the edge to the more modern player, but I have no problem with putting older guys on these lists, and I had the first two episodes, and there's going to be one or two in these as well. So yeah, let's get into it. My number 30, and I'll tell you briefly like who was behind my number 30. So spoiler alert if you want to go back and listen to the previous podcast, but 31 was Charles Barkley, 32 was Elgin Baylor, 33 Isaiah Thomas, 34 Steve Nash, and 35 Bob Pettit. I won't go back any more than that. But those are the guys that are right behind my number 30. And at 30, I have Scottie Pippen, one of the most unsung heroes in basketball history, but also in a way he really wasn't because he is here at number 30. So without Pippen, Jordan isn't Jordan. And you can't take that out of proportion and say that's why Michael Jordan should not be the GOAT of basketball, because every GOAT in their respective sports had their sidekicks and everything else that they need to be successful. Patrick Mahomes right now, who is not the GOAT of football, but he's going to be top 2 in my opinion. He has an insane defense with Steve Spagnuolo as the coordinator and one of the best coaches in Andy Reid alongside him. So that's a big thing. He wouldn't even made the Super Bowl 2 years ago without his defense against the Ravens in the AFC Championship game, and he wouldn't have won the Super Bowl either if it wasn't for his defense in a big-time stop. And it's not an if or hypothetical situation. It's not taken away from Patrick Mahomes. I don't like to live in ifs. It's actually the exact opposite. I'm trying to discredit people that say, if it wasn't for Pippen, MJ would not be MJ, because it's just silly. Every guy has their Robin. So that's why Scottie Pippen, I really like him. You can't say it flaws him. You really can't. And he's one of the greatest perimeter defenders of all time, which is backed by 10-time all-defensive teams. And one of the first kind of like point forwards in like basketball. He could kind of do a little bit of everything. Like just being able to facilitate, play good defense, or play as like a 4. Very, very good player. Probably the best number 2 option in NBA history. And when MJ retired in that little stint, he retired. Pippen had a chance to prove himself, and he kind of did. He finished 3rd in MVP voting that year and got the Bulls to the second round. He lost in 7 games that second round, but still kind of proved that Scottie Pippen was, that guy still, regardless of Michael Jordan. But it's, those two together is what made the Bulls dynasty, plus Dennis Rodman and some other players. So it's not a knock on either of them. They were a great tandem. So 7-time All-Star, 7-time All-NBA, 6-time NBA champion, a steals title 94 and 95. Scottie Pippen, one of the most unsung heroes, as I said, but also at the same time, he does get his respect and flowers, and that's why he's here number 30. Now, getting to my number 29, this one, this is all opinionated, as I said. Number 29, I had John Havlicek, and I might be in the minority of people that have him over Scottie Pippen here. But remember, this is about legacy, dominance, and I think Havlicek kind of deserves the spot according to that criteria, even though both him and Pippen have some insane legacies. But Havlicek was an integral part of 2 Celtics dynasties, honestly, with Bill Russell led in the 60s and Dave Cowens in the mid-70s running the center position. He went from being a crucial role player for that team and turned into kind of like a franchise guy, like a franchise cornerstone for them. So at the time, he retired as the Celtics' all-time leading scorer, still top 5 all-time, and finished his career 13-time All-Star, 11-time All-NBA, 8-time All-Defense, 8-time NBA champion, including a Finals MVP in 1974 in the post-Bill Russell era. So it wasn't just Bill Russell. And so honestly, this is one of those older guys. I know it's a little controversial if you're if you don't like talking about the older gen. But if you look at the numbers and if you look at the accolades and what John Havlicek did for the Celtics, for me, it's why he's at number 29 here above Scottie Pippen. And I know those 8 NBA championships a little bit different in a small league, but they still mean something. And John Havlicek, even though he didn't win MVP, he was an MVP candidate for a good 5 or 6 straight years, coming in top 10 5 or 6 straight years. So, a very good player. Again, I don't. If I wanted to do, and maybe I will do this at some point in time, maybe I will do a NBA rankings of like excluding the older guys in the ABA and pre 3 point line stuff. But as of now, this is basketball history, and I like John Havlicek at 29. But I want to point this out. I also saw a video today. I think it was the 1970 NBA Finals. I think it was Lakers Knicks. I forget what it was. It was in the 70s. I know that. And it was, the skill is a lot. It's not as bad as people make it out to be. It's really not. I suggest you go watch some like colored film of it. It is kind of interesting. I got to see Wilt Chamberlain ball a little bit. It's kind of interesting. Him and Jerry West. So I'm being serious. It's not as big as you think it is. Obviously, um, there is a skill gap between today's gen and that generation, but not as big as you think it would be. So that's my number 29. And 28 and 27 is interesting. I had a tough time at 28 and 27. James Harden, this is spoiler alert, James Harden will be at my 28. Allen Iverson is at my 27. It was so close. Um, you know, Allen Iverson was originally my 28, and James Harden was my 27. But I just couldn't do it. Even as a Sixers fan, maybe it's a little biased there. This was so tough to do because, in my opinion, I'll talk about each individually right now. So I'll start with James Harden because he's at 28. In my opinion, at his peak, this is the greatest scorer basketball has ever seen. And it's a shame he couldn't make it to the finals or back to the finals after his stint with the Thunder early in his career. But I even watched some of his highlights this morning, prime James Harden highlights, and for me, I think he is the greatest scorer of all time when he was at his peak. It's unbelievable to watch in all facets of the game. He was so dangerous, and he even pushed the Golden State Warriors in 2018 to 7 games in the Western Conference Finals, which is pretty insane. So came close to going to the NBA Finals. I think they would have won it that year, but if this, if that. Averaging 36.1 PPG in 2018 with the Rockets was just insane. And if he didn't run into the Warriors in that West for those handful of years, things may have been different. But he still is effective even today. And even with his stint with the Sixers, as obviously a Philly Sports Talk Sixers fan here, while inconsistent at times, he could still be dominant. We saw it in that Celtics series, a couple of games, 40-plus point performances, but unfortunately the other ones were bad performances. But still, he led the league in assists per game one of his years with the Sixers as well. It was definitely on display as a playmaker. So he still is effective even to this day. One of the most deadly players off the pick and roll. Could shoot at will, drive, pass, anything you think of, I can name it. Seriously, James Harden, one of the most entertaining players to watch that I've seen of this generation. And it was tough to put Allen Iverson over him, but at the same time, it wasn't. This is a Sixers podcast, guys. And not only that, I'll get into why I have AI in a second. But James Harden, 11-time All-Star, 8-time All-NBA, 3 scoring titles, 2 assist titles, and MVP back in 2018. And who knows, he still has a pretty good team right now with the Clippers. Maybe he could go on and win one. But we've been saying about the Clippers for a long time now. But a ring could definitely, an impactful ring where he played a big role on this team, could play some big roles as moving him up on this list. So James Harden at number 28. Number 27, Allen Iverson, as I said. And again, for me, this was tough, but Allen Iverson was like a symbol of basketball then. Like, I feel like he was the first guy with like, kind of like style. He wasn't the first, but he was kind of just, I don't know. He was monumental for the growth of basketball as style, as everything. He stood at 6 foot, 165 pounds, and was an unbelievable scorer, leading the league in scoring 4 times, averaging over 26 points per game for his career. Again, there's just a certain type of aura around Allen Iverson. I really do wish that I could have grown up to watch him as a diehard Sixers fan, and he was just so cool and popular. And he's famous for his iconic photo of stepping over Tyronn Lue in Game 1 of the 2001 NBA Finals, in which he dropped 48 points that game. And it's a shame that he could not get a ring either, like James Harden, as he ran into Kobe and Shaq's Lakers in that NBA Finals around a pretty weak Sixers team, honestly. But AI, he led the league in minutes per game for seven different times, which is pretty crazy in 14 seasons. He averaged over 40 minutes per game, which is insane in that time. 11-time All-Star, 7-time All-NBA, 3 steal titles, 4 scoring titles, 2001 MVP, and a Rookie of the Year as well. So I felt wrong as a Sixers fan not to have him here. And again, he was such a symbol for basketball. And this is one of the rare times where I kind of gave the older guy. And honestly, it's not really older. When I was saying older guys earlier, I was talking about the 60s, 70s. But I guess you could say the older guy, the edge over the newer gen in James Harden. But I don't know. This is not a crazy ranking at all for Allen Iverson. He was a symbol for basketball. It's a shame he couldn't get a ring. But James Harden doesn't have one either. So that's my number 27. And at number 26, I have one of my favorite players of all time, John Stockton. And for good reason. This is one of those guys that 1 or 2 reigns could have done some serious damage moving up on this list. Seriously. Leads NBA history all time in assists with 15,806, which is a record that I think may never be broken. Chris Paul is next in line at 12,499, but that's not close. It's really not that close. Again, this is going to be Chris Paul's last season. So also, again, as I said, does not have a reign like Iverson and Harden and all them. He made 2 NBA Finals, losing to MJ's Bulls twice in back-to-back years. Again, a bad time to be contending. If you've been watching all these episodes, you'll know that a lot of these guys just ran into some big-time dynasties, and this is one of them. But Stockton Malone, probably the best dude to never win a ring, honestly. And Stockton also leads NBA history in steals all-time at 3,265. So being the all-time leader in steals and assists, that means something. He averaged 10.5 assists per game over 19 seasons and led the league in assists for 9 straight years, which is unreal. So one of the most dominant players in pick and roll of all time between him and Karl Malone. Obviously, a big part of that was Karl Malone as well. And that's because he just was such a deadly facilitator. He was also an efficient shooter, shooting 51.5% from the field for his career, 38.4 from three, and 82.6 from the line. And he also had he had an Ironman streak, kind of similar to Elvin Hayes. Again, if you listen to part 1 of the podcast series, played 1,504 games out of a possible 1,526. So really, really stacked resume, honestly, from John Stockton here. One of the most flawless kind of players in basketball history, if I'm being honest. And 10-time All-Star, 5-time All-Defense, 11-time All-NBA. Again, as I said, 9 assist titles, 2 steal titles. Take a look at his basketball reference. You'll see a lot of bold on it, especially in assists. Averaging 14.5 assists per game in a season, 13.6, 13.8, 14.2, 13.7, 12, 11.2, 12.6. Just ridiculous. Averaging 3.2 steals per game, 3 steals per game. It's a ridiculous basketball reference page, and it's a shame he could not get a ring because this is one of my favorite players of all time, and for good reason, honestly. So, John Stockton, number 26, he gets the edge over AI and James Harden. He's been to more NBA Finals than both of them, but that's really not the main reason. I just think John Stockton is one of the best pure point guards of all time and was really just a flawless player. So, Stockton gets at number 26. At number 25, I had Dwayne Wade. So, we go from one of the best shooting guards or point guards of all time in Stockton. This is one of the best shooting guards. And I had him at 25 here for legacy reasons over John Stockton. I'll get to that in a second. He could kind of do everything as a shooting guard, playing defense and offense at an elite level, and is responsible for one of the best finals performances of all time in 2006. He helped bring the Heat back from an 0-2 deficit against the Mavs to win Finals MVP, averaging 34.7 points per game, 7.8 rebounds, 3.8 assists. And that's also within the first 4 or so seasons of his career, which is pretty insane. He has the most block shots by a guard in NBA history. And again, 3 NBA championships. He got 2 more after convincing LeBron and Bosh to join him in Miami. But he's a big reason that those two guys wanted to come over. So again, this is a legacy thing, and uh, quite frankly, I think Dwayne Wade's performance in the 2006 NBA Finals is what put him over Stockton for me in this case scenario. Again, Stockton no reigns, even though he had a run into MJ's bowls. And I really kind of did want to put Stockton over Dwayne Wade here, but I just couldn't do it. I think that, based off my criteria here, Dwayne Wade is just responsible for a little bit more meaningful stuff in terms of legacy than I had Stockton for. But it's really close. Honestly, the more I talk about it, I kind of wish I had Stockton at 25, but at the same time, I think Dwayne Wade more fits my criteria here. A 13-time All-Star, 8-time All-NBA, 3-time All-Defense, winning the scoring title in 2009. Again, I kind of like Stockton more, but Dwayne Wade's legacy just lives a little bit larger here at number 25 for me. So, going into my next ranking, this is where things get a little interesting. I like this bottom four guys that we have left here. Number 24, I have Kawhi Leonard. And this might be the scariest player a legend could ever come against in his prime. Kawhi can lock up the best of the best, including LeBron James, which is backed up by 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards, 7-time All-Defensive Teams. And the big thing here at number 24 is he has 2 Finals MVPs and beating 2 of the biggest names in basketball history, who I'll get to that in a later podcast in this series. He won Finals MVP in 2014, controlling the series for the Spurs over the Heat, locked up LeBron James, wasn't even close. It was a gentleman's sweep. And then again in 2019, he wins the Finals MVP against the Warriors and Steph Curry. Now, granted, I know the Warriors suffered a couple injuries later in that series, but they won in 6 games. And the Raptors, I'll tell you what, Kawhi Leonard was dominant. That playoff series, or that playoffs in general, was probably one of the greatest basketball players I've ever seen. So, to have 2 Finals wins and Finals MVPs over the likes of LeBron James and the Heat and Steph Curry and the Warriors, that's some big time legacy, which gets back to everything I've been talking about in these rankings. So even though people may remember him for what he is now, which is still a really good player, but it's not 2019 Kawhi. But at his peak during that 2019 Raptors playoff run and in the 2010s, he was one of the greatest players I've ever seen, if I'm being honest. And it's just because of how dominant he was on both sides of the floor. 6-time All-Star, 6-time All-NBA, the 2 Finals MVPs, as I said, the 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards, 7-time All-Defense, and a Steals title. Nearly a 50-40-90 player currently. So, for me, Kawhi Leonard here at 24, he literally beat Dwayne Wade in the NBA Finals in 2014. And Dwayne Wade's resume might be a little bit larger, but again, it comes down to legacy and dominance for me. And Kawhi Leonard with those 2 Finals MVPs in, beating those 2 teams, the likes that he did was just unbelievable. And that's why, for me, the legacy looms a little bit larger here at number 24 for Kawhi Leonard. And he was also one of the most dominant players I've seen in his prime. I've gotten to witness, seriously. So it deserved here at 24 for Kawhi Leonard for me. Getting in at number 23. Now, this one was kind of interesting for me as well because I actually originally had him at 21, but I kind of thought about it, and I had him fall 2 spots for some other reasons, and I'll get into why in a few. But at 23, I have Karl Malone. So, also remember that Jazz team, as I've recently mentioned John Stockton, a couple rankings earlier, an MVP candidate for 15 straight seasons, winning 2 of them, coming short to MJ in the MVP a couple of times, and twice in the NBA Finals as well, as I talked about with Stockton prior. Second all-time in scoring, and he was first for a long time until a couple years ago when LeBron James took the reins over. 36,928 career points. I'm going to stay away from his legal problems in this debate, and I absolutely do not condone them at all. And stuff like that, and without being brainless, is what docked him a couple rankings here to fall. But another one of those players that kind of just ran into a tough dynasty, as I was talking about earlier, against MJ's Bulls. He was an insanely dominant scorer, one of the best of all time, averaging 25 points per game for his career, along with 10 rebounds as well for his career. And he did it. He averaged 25 PPG for 11 straight seasons while also shooting 51.6% from the field in his career. So, some crazy numbers there. I think that in due time, Karl Malone is just going to become like a forgotten kind of player, and he's going to fall even more and more on this list because of, again, as I said, the legal issues and stuff. But Uh, 14-time All-Star, 14-time All-NBA, two-time MVP, four-time All-Defense, two-time All-Star Game MVP, for what that's worth. I originally had him at 21, as I said, but again, Karl Malone, really dominant scorer, one of the best players of all time. Seriously, that's why he's on number 23. Led the NBA in scoring for all these years, so that does mean something, and I'll get into why he fell in just a moment. But my number 22, I had the Admiral David Robinson, and this is one of my favorite players on these rankings so far. Some guys might have him a little bit lower than me, but he's like the first big dynasty guy for the Spurs, and kind of is what started it. He was dominant on both sides of the ball, 7'1", 235 pounds. I want to point that out. So a freak athlete. And I wish I was old enough to watch the '99 finals in which he got that first ring, and then to kind of watch as Tim Duncan came along, and Dave Robinson kind of like let him take over a little bit, but they formed that Twin Towers duo, which is just unbelievable. Like I wish I got to see that stuff, and that's how they got their second ring with that core between Robinson and Duncan. So some really cool stuff. He also served in the U.S. Navy for 2 years before joining the NBA, so that's obviously better than playing basketball, serving your country. But maybe he could have even climbed more ranks here on this list if he played this couple years. But he scored 71 points in the final game of the 1994 season to win the scoring title over Shaq, averaging 29.8 points per game that season. And really, without David Robinson, the Spurs wouldn't be where they are today. With Victor Wembanyama, like looking at it like a franchise guy. So David Robinson kind of flipped it into Tim Duncan, and then Tim Duncan eventually turned that over to Victor Wembanyama, as what we're looking at right now, which is pretty cool. Even though obviously Duncan and Wembanyama didn't get to play together, but we're looking at Wemby as like one of those guys, and it's because David Robinson started all this. He really did. 10-time All-Star, 10-time All-NBA, 1994-95 MVP, 8-time defense, a scoring title, a block title, a rebound title, a Defensive Player of the Year award in 1992, two-time NBA champ, and a Rookie of the Year. So a really stacked resume. There's no debating that. And just for all those reasons, I don't see why I would not have him over Karl Malone. Legacy-wise, with the reigns and kind of like the start of that franchise, or the Spurs franchise, like dynasties between him, then to Tim Duncan, and then to maybe what could eventually be Wemby's Spurs soon, if they could start to be competitive. But that's why I have him over Karl Malone. And honestly, the more I think about it, the more I don't even think it's close at this point. So David Robinson gets 22 for me. And getting into my final ranking of this episode at number 21, and this was a close one, Giannis Antetokounmpo. So this one's kind of interesting. He has less rings than Robinson and Kawhi, but Giannis is one of the most dominant players I've ever seen and in basketball history. He's the top 5 most dominant player in NBA history. I don't think that's a question. It's not recency bias either. It's just a fact. 2 MVPs and a Finals MVP, with an insane closeout game, by the way, in the 2021 NBA Finals against the Suns in Game 6, scoring 50 points, had 14 rebounds, 5 blocks. The Bucks were down 0-2 in that series, and he came back, propelling the Bucks to win that series. Only the third player in NBA history to win Defensive Player of the Year and MVP in the same season, along with Hakeem Olajuwon and Michael Jordan. So, 2 guys you're going to hear later in this podcast series, and can guard 1 through 5 on defense while being unguardable on offense. So, I mean, what could you ask for more from a basketball player? That's it. He could have ditched the Milwaukee Bucks and maybe went somewhere else to help build more of a legacy, but he stuck with them. He signed the extension, won the finals with them. Now, I'm intrigued to see if he decides to leave at some point in time soon to help try to build onto that legacy. But because Milwaukee's they're kind of in a bad spot right now. So, but again, that should be interesting to see. A 9-time All-Star, 9-time All-NBA, 5-time All-Defense, Defensive Player of the Year award, 2 MVPs, 1 Finals MVP, for what it's worth, the NBA Cup MVP. So, just want to throw that out there. His dominance for me, and the fact that he is completely unguardable, is why I had him over David Robinson here, and the likes of Kawhi Leonard and Karl Malone. So Karl Malone, again, I originally had him at 21, and the more I thought about it, he should not be over Robinson or Giannis. And that's why, those 2 legacies for me just are a little bit larger than Karl Malone's. And obviously, off-the-court issues for Malone helped that. But even without that, I don't think I would have had him at 21 to end this series anyway. So, yeah, I'll break down, or I'll say again these rankings one more time. At 30, I had Scottie Pippen, 29, John Havlicek, 28, James Harden, 27, Allen Iverson, 26, John Stockton, 25, Dwayne Wade, 24, Kawhi Leonard, 23, Karl Malone, 22, David Robinson, and 21, Giannis Antetokounmpo. So, part three of this series is in the books, and I'll start to get ready to record part two, which will come out in just a couple of days. And I'll wrap up my notes for that, and we'll continue this series. But again, I hope you guys are really enjoying this. Leave some comments on what you guys think is pretty crazy, what you think is cool, or what you think it makes sense, or what you would change. So, but yeah, that's gonna do it. Thank you guys for listening, and stay on the lookout for part four of Rankings 20 through 11.